So look, if you know anything about C5 or C6 Corvettes, you know that one of the very few weak points on these cars are the hub bearings. We have actually wasted a lot of money in the last 6 months, especially ever since we've been running this car on sticky tires, on track, and with additional horsepower, going through cheap hub bearings. And it's come to the point where we're really not saving any money. In fact, we've spent way more money trying to save money on cheap hub bearings than just fixing them once and for all by putting on these SKF X-Tracker bearings. Now, these are widely regarded as the go-to hub for C5 and C6 Corvettes. They are much stronger than the originals or even the aftermarket third-party bearings that go in here. And today we are going to help you install these guys. Now, before we get to that, let me address the big question here, which is whenever I talk about these, everybody says, well, I'm just autocrossing, or I just do a couple of track days a year, or I'm really not that hard on the car. First off, here's how you know your hubs are starting to go bad. You want to go up to the wheel, you want to give it a little shake in a vertical axis. If you shake it this way, you might not get any deflection because you're working against the tie rod, the control arms. If you do get any deflection that way, you might have a little issue with your front or rear tie rod or with your control arm attachments. So you want to shake this wheel on a vertical axis and listen for this. Chris, you get that? Excellent. So that's bad. I'm very, very sad that Chris got that. That means that this bearing is starting to go bad because we're getting deflection of that bearing. This bearing has exactly 20 autocross runs and about 14 hard laps of NCM Motorsports Park, and it is no more. So that is how fast these bearings can go bad. We've tried at this point every single aftermarket brand, GM factory stuff. We are not getting any real use out of them on sticky Hoosier tires, on Yokohama 200 treadwear tires, on Falcons, on whatever. Just break down and get the good stuff, the SKFs. These retail for roughly $400 a corner. Prices vary a little bit right now because shipping is all over the place. We got these from Sam Strano at Strano Parts. A bunch of different retailers out there have them. Sam was great, shipped them right away. And you will, again, $400 is kind of the bogey for these. Sometimes they might be less, sometimes might be a little bit more, but if you can find them for around 400 bucks, you're doing pretty good. So let's get to installing. First thing we're gonna need to do here, get this wheel off, get the hub off from the inside. We'll take you through that step by step. All right, we're gonna start by taking this wheel off. So in order to get the hub out from inside here, we're gonna need to get this brake caliper off. That will let us get the rotor off. And we're also gonna have to release this axle from inside that shaft. Now, the front and the rear are practically identical when it comes to doing this operation. The rear is a little bit more complicated because you do have this axle to deal with. In the front, basically the same. In fact, the front and rear hubs are actually interchangeable as long as they have the splines in them. But the only real difference is you have to remove these axles from the rear. That's one of the only places you're going to need a specialized tool here. It's either a 34 or a 33 millimeter socket to get this off, depending on production date of the car. But we will deal with that as we are taking things apart. First, let's get this brake caliper off. So we are removing some Willwood calipers here. But the procedure is going to be the same whether you're removing aftermarket calipers or stock calipers. Whatever you've got there, you're going to need to get those calipers off so you can get your rotor off. And to keep us from accidentally letting it rest on the brake hose. So once that caliper's out, we can simply remove the rotor off of here. And the first thing we notice is we have a bad tie rod end boot back here. So we'll be replacing that when we do some more work on the back of the C5. Next steps, fairly straightforward. We're going to have to remove this end of the tie rod end so we can articulate this knuckle here, and remove this lower ball joint connection so we can rotate it up and out, get to the fasteners of this hub from the back, and then remove it from the front. So next we're just going to work on getting things clear back here so we can rotate this knuckle. Now, some people will tell you you got to remove both the upper and lower ball joints. Certainly you can. Nothing is stopping you from doing that. You don't actually have to, though. You do have to separate the lower ball joint because there's a fastener you can only get to because it is behind the threads of the lower ball joint that extend up through that knuckle. But there is plenty of room once you remove this tie rod and this ball joint and slip it out of the axle to rotate this up and out and get to the back of the fasteners for this, this hub. So from here, we can just start disconnecting the ABS sensor and disconnecting mechanical pieces until we have enough room to physically take this hub out of here. So take our ABS sensor off. Let's get our tie rod next. Depending on what type of tie rods you have back here or what type of maintenance has been done on the car, what parts you've used, you may have to get an Allen wrench in the top of this tie rod to take it off. So we're going to use a ball joint separator here to pop this tie rod off. These are extremely handy. Always recommend using these instead of the hammer method, just because you're much less likely to damage something. Use our very same ball joint tool to separate this lower ball joint here. And you'll notice I'm not pressing directly on the male part of the threaded fastener. I'm loosening the nut and leaving the nut engaged on top, and just using that to stabilize everything and basically putting the strain on, a combination of the nut and the top of the male part of the threaded fastener. You want to protect those threads, and you don't want to damage anything you don't have to, or put strain on anything you don't have to. And these sometimes go with a pretty impressive pop, especially if you haven't done this before. So be careful. The other thing leaving that nut on there does is prevents that arm from just flying all the way down. So things, when they come apart a little bit less violently. I just gave that a little bit of percussion to loosen it. You don't want to, that's an aluminum upright, you don't want to really hammer on that. We just wanted to introduce a little bit of vibration in there. So now we can lift this easily off of that ball joint, and we'll be doing that in just a second to get this axle out. So let's take the axle off next. Again, this is going to be a 33 or a 34 millimeter fastener. So now that we can articulate this knuckle a lot better, you can see that you don't actually have to take that upper ball joint off, because you can get to all three of these rear bolts here. And this is something you're definitely going to want to do with some kind of a power tool. An air impact fits a lot better back here, but as you can see, I have no problem getting my battery impact back here. So earmuffs, everybody. This is a T55 Torx. That's about the only other special tool you're going to need to complete this operation. Now, if you've never done this before, these are fastened on here with some pretty gnarly GM spec thread locking compound. So they are going to come off of there pretty tough. So just understand that going in. Make sure you have all your tools lined up properly, and they can produce enough torque to actually get these fasteners out of here. Once those 3 fasteners are off, the hub is actually loose. We just have to make sure that our ABS sensor is disconnected from the bracket, and it comes right on out. And there's our bad hub. So installation, literally the reverse of removal. The only thing we're going to do to prep this hub, you can actually see we've got 5 ARP wheel studs in here already. This is the stud it's going to come with. Some aftermarket suppliers, if it's a Corvette race shop, they can supply it to you with ARP studs installed. We're going to install them ourselves because we had a bunch of them sitting around here. So real quick, we're going to show you how to take out your old studs and properly put in the new studs. To remove the old studs, we're just going to use the exact same ball joint tool we've been using to take off the tie rods and the ball joints. You don't want to use a hammer on these. Now, if you're taking hubs off that are bad and you want to get your old studs out of bad hubs, yes, by all means go ahead and hammer them to your little heart's content, but you don't want to hammer on new hubs because you don't want to put a ton of axial strain on hubs that you haven't installed yet. So let's go ahead and use some mechanical leverage advantage here. And again, these are under tension, so be careful. Those can sometimes fly out of there a little bit aggressively. Next, all we have to do is go over to the press and install our final ARP wheel stud. Now, a warning. Even though these have all been pressed in hydraulically, you still want to take your time when you're torquing these wheels. In fact, you want to torque these wheels several times. Do a torque pass, do another torque pass, get a little bit of heat into the assembly, do another torque pass, and make sure these are all the way set before you are out there doing 100%, 101% laps on these newly seated fasteners. So you can even see some of the leftover GM thread locking compound that was originally put on these things. This is what they smeared on here that didn't get threaded in. We're going to put some blue thread lock compound on there to replace it. And then once you install these from the back, you want to properly torque these. 96 foot-pounds these babies go in. Now the bottom one you're going to have to do before you drop the hub down onto the lower ball joint because you don't have room to do it. The top two, once you drop that hub down onto the ball joint, are a lot easier to torque, without help basically, because both ends of the knuckle are then constrained. Yeah, and definitely run these guys in a substantial amount by hand. The last thing you want is to cross thread one of the fasteners in your brand new $400 hubs. And it's all 3 the same bolts back here, but you'll notice once they're tightened down, these 2 up on top here are proud of the surface, and this one on the bottom is recessed to clear the back of the ball joint fastener. We'll just give those a couple quick ugga-duggas and then get our torque wrench out and properly torque those down. So once our ABS sensor's back in place there, now we can actually start reassembling things. We'll start by taking our little Protecto towel off of here. Now this axle nut, this needs to get torqued down to various figures. The shop manual calls for 118 foot-pounds, but there was also a technical service bulletin that addressed people's complaints where their axle nuts were starting to come loose, that said you can go ahead and go to 140 foot-pounds. So Chevy recommends either 118 or 140 foot-pounds for this axle nut. In either case, it's something you're going to have to do with somebody in the car and their foot on the brake usually. So we'll save that till after, and we'll let you decide what to torque those to. We usually split the difference and go to about 130, and we've never had any issues with them that we're aware of. And again, just like your wheel nuts, go back and hit this again for torque after it's had a couple of heat cycles. Now we used some race style rebuildable ball joints from Howe, and my torque standard for them tends to be, you know, reasonably tight, plus whatever it takes to get to the hole to get the cotter pin into. So we are just about done here. We will get our broken tie rod back in place here. We'll be replacing that fairly soon. Forget to hook your wheel speed sensor back up. And that's the only critical alignment point in the clocking of how this hub goes in there. You want your wheel speed sensor line to go back to where it's supposed to go. It's pretty obvious once you get it out. Just make sure your wheel speed sensor is aimed right at the bracket that it attaches to. And that's it, folks. That's we got this done, and we never have to worry about it again, supposedly, because we've used those SKF X-Trackers, and we never have to worry about these dumb things again. So easily in an afternoon, you can do all four wheels on your C5. The front's nearly identical to doing the rears. The only difference is your tie rod is going to be in front instead of in behind, and you're not going to have an axle to deal with. So that is about it for this. And if you take one thing away from this, it's that sometimes the cheapest parts do not save you any money in the long run. For the roughly $400 that each of these cost, we probably bought several of these thinking we were saving money. So it's a very false economy when you're using these. Use these good SKF X-Trackers on your C5 or C6, and hopefully you will not ever have to deal with them again. We are looking forward to never having to deal with them again. Folks, if you like the content we're making, please check us out on the web at grassrootsmotorsports.com. Go right down here, give this video a like, subscribe to our channel, leave a comment down there, and let us know if you've had trouble with off-brand hubs, or if you've had success with these hubs, or whatever else you're feeling about C5 hubs might be. I know we are very frustrated having to deal with changing these things all the time, and we are looking forward to never having to do it again. I'm JG Pasterjack. We'll see you in the garage next time. Thanks for watching Grassroots Motorsports.
Support brands that support Grassroots Motorsports. Get your chemical solutions from CRC Industries. Visit crcindustries.com to learn more.